Okay, here we go. Day two without Andy. Hopefully, this time I'm not going to have any technical difficulties. I have my timer set up on a different device than what I'm recording off of. I think that's what screwed me up last time. But here we go. So, yeah, I think it's kind of neat, when we see some of our fans interact with, or the listeners. I wouldn't say, I guess they're maybe not fans, but our listeners out there doing things about what we say on the pod or do on the pod. So last week we had the short question, whether Andy, of course, likes the short shorts. I, on the other hand, I'm a little bit resistant to do it. I don't mind doing it with running or anything like that. But Andy's like the 3 incher, so he's comfortable in that manhood. I like him a little bit lower than that. But we had one of our one of our listeners get on and didn't think we represented the poll or got the right things from the poll there. And it's strange.bird.gr noted that on, I guess, a couple days ago that we didn't get sufficient sample size from the Hoochie Daddy Shorts quiz. So the reposting it out, and it looks, I think there were about 34 votes, and 79% said, hell yeah, men in shorter shorts a la Magnum PI in the 80s. Definitely something people are listening for. So 34% or 80% of 34. So do the math there. 21% said hell no. I think we would have known. I would have been in the hell no category. But that is what it is. Shout out to them for doing that. Really appreciate all the interaction there. We've got a lot of great people engaging with us on the socials, whether that be X or whether that be Threads. Like Andy's on Threads a lot. I probably need to get on there a little bit more. I'm just still a little reticent to. Every time I try to go there, it just I don't know. I don't get the same feel. I don't love X anymore either. I'm just in a no man's land for social. So if anybody's got any ideas, love to hear them. But again, this is day two of three without Andy. I feel like I'm lost sometimes, but I will power on. I know Andy's having a good time with his family out on vacation, and he's probably wearing those short shorts. So, all right, we're going to get into things a little early today. Again, apologies for Monday's pod. I had two segments, one on politics and then one on cooking shows. I just want to hit the cooking one real quickly. This isn't going to be on the 3x7 at all, but I saw like these. My point was, people get on and they try any number of like just shitty recipes in there, and of course they're gonna taste it and think it's like the best thing since sliced bread. Why would you post it if you're gonna post garbage? I've tried a couple of these things, and and I'm here to tell you they kind of suck. Some of them. I mean, there was a great. I like to drink some bourbon. There's a great strawberry kind of bourbon, hot honey bourbon. I tried it. It sucked. It was awful. It was just awful. And then I saw one just last night. Uh, they took a wagyu steak, put it into they carved out a space for it in a watermelon, and then use that marinated in that watermelon. And then they took same size cut up of that watermelon and grilled should I try this? Should I try a grilled watermelon with like olive oil, Worcestershire, or any other of these type of sauces, salt and pepper on it, just like you would doctor a steak, you would do it at a watermelon? I don't know. And would I try a wagyu steak like marinated in watermelon? This just sounds stupid. Like I think it's just people are like, "Hey, what's the most outrageous thing I can do?" And I'm going to put it on there, and of course, it's going to taste fucking delicious. Well, anyway, so I just wanted to get that off my chest. We'll see about my government, my politics rant. I don't know if I feel good enough about it without Andy commenting on it, but we'll see. We'll see how we stack up for Friday. But I got a couple things we want to go through today, so let's get the ball started. I'm starting the clock. The first 3x7 starts now, and of course, we're going to start other than the premiere of the Acolyte last night. I was a little taken back, first of all, because I thought when Disney dropped their shows, it was like the midnight before, so like 12:01 on Tuesday. So I go in, put my daughter to bed, I'm ready to go. It's like 8:30, and I go to Disney Plus and it says it starts at 9 o'clock. I'm like, what? When is this? Like, what are we doing? I think we're going back to like how cable was, is shows on set times. But I know Disney does it for some shows, and HBO, of course, famously does it with their prestige shows and their big shows. So just a little taken back about it. But overall, two episodes dropped. The first one was about 45 minutes. The second one was about 35 minutes. I think that's the right length, everyone. I like the shows that way. I can power through them. I don't need an hour and 15 minutes in fact, it kind of turns me off when I see an episode is over an hour because there are no commercials. It's just, you got to go through it. But I thought this was the right length. And I thought, it started off the premiere event. It started off with a really great action sequence. Alec Davidson, one of the people I work with, he brought up that the action was going to be really good, and it did. Did not disappoint. I really liked the environment they were setting things up, like laying down how the Jedi were working in this old Republic era. They were in these outposts. They manned they had their special areas, and everybody knew the Jedi were welcome and friendly around the Jedi. And I thought I thought they set that up without having to come out and like really set it up. They just gave you bits of information, made you like understand how that was working, and I thought they did a really nice job with that front. Again, the action sequence in the beginning was good, and then they started setting up a little bit more of the environment about, they brought in the Trade Federation, that stuff from the old, from episode one, where we hadn't seen any of those characters before, but now we see them in a different type of setting. And I thought that was nice how they incorporated some of those characters in there as well. And then, of course, you have this mystique around the Jedi when they come into a place. Very, I think, reminiscent of how I felt in episode one, where that opening scene where Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan go and try to resolve the conflict. It felt very much similar to that. These are how the Jedi are used in this period of time. This is what, how they're going to work. And I thought that was really well done on their part. I think after the opening of that first episode, I think it did kind of, the pace of it kind of slowed down. I guess it's probably more that setting up the mystery, setting up what's happening, why this is happening. I'm not going to try to spoil anything because, again, it just did go live last night. So, in case anybody's listening to this pod this morning, I don't want to spoil anything. But I think they set up the stage really well in these first two episodes and how things worked. I was a little disappointed with, the Carrie Ann Moss character. I really was hoping to see a lot of that. And so just a little disappointed on that part. But I think for the most part, I really enjoyed it. It kept my attention. Again, the length was really good. And I think they did a good job of setting up the stage for what was happening. I think in sometimes it felt too TV-ish. I was hoping it would be a little bit more of the movie part, and they did jump around to a lot of different locations. So I think that's an area where, just because you have the whole galaxy to work with doesn't mean you have to go to every part of the whole galaxy, and they can kind of slow that out. I still don't know how many episodes this is going to wind up being. Is it going to be six? Is it going to be eight? Or 12 like Andor was? But I think they did a nice job. I think it met my expectations. It didn't overly impress. It didn't overly disappoint. So I think I was in a good space. I was in a much better space than I was with Ahsoka, and probably maybe a little bit about the right space where I was with Andor. And of course, I think Andor is the crown jewel. I probably felt the same way I did about Mandalorian, but that was different too because that was the first TV show that Star Wars had done. And so I kind of I felt pretty good. I'd be interested to hear other people's takes. I am going to be interested to see a little bit more of the action. They did a nice job again setting up the pieces. letting you know where it's going to go. I still don't know fully how far we're going to get into certain things, and so it will be good to see. And then I do think what's going to be an interesting piece is when this is over, whether this is going to be another season or if they're going to add. And again, this is 100 years before effectively about the story of the within the Phantom Menace. So you still have a large bridge to go. So they have a lot of building to go in between there. The question again also is, do we see some of the characters like Yoda? Obviously, Yoda's very old at the end of Star Wars, but so he would be alive during this period. Are we going to see Yoda in this period? Are we going to see? Are they going to try to make connections to other people? It doesn't seem like it right now, and I'd be happy. I'm happy with that, but I'll be interested to see where we go with that. So overall, I was pretty happy. I would say I'd give it about an 8 out of a 10 if I were rating it. And I'm excited to see where it goes moving forward. And then starting next week, also, actually, it's not next week, the week after, I think, or I'll have to go back and check. You have the House of the Dragon season 2 coming out too. So we're going to have a lot to talk about on the pop culture front. We're going to have a lot to get into, and I'm excited about that. And with that, I'm at 20 seconds left on my timer. So I'm going to hit stop here. I think I've said all I need to say on that. I'm going to be interested to hear what Andy has to say on his how he feels about it when he gets there as well. Okay, so let's go into the next topic. So I'm going to set the timer again. The second 3x7. So number 2 here. Hey, so on Monday I talked a little bit about some of the sports check-in. I talked about the Premier Lacrosse League. I'm excited about going to the games here in Charlotte on Saturday with my son. So that'll be the first time I get to go there. But I also think there's another interesting piece of news that came out over the last 2 weeks. Major League Baseball decided to add in the Negro League stats into their all-time record book. So again, the Negro Leagues were obviously part of when before baseball was segregated, before Jackie Robinson, and of course a lot of the other trailblazers that came in. Before all of that happened, there was the Negro League, and it was wildly popular. There were a lot of great athletes, as you can imagine. There, Satchel Paige and many others that were part of the Negro League because they couldn't be part of Major League Baseball. And so I thought it was a great move by Major League Baseball to put in and incorporate those stats. They've done a really great job of connecting with the Negro Leagues. You see them in some of the cities that had old Negro League teams. You'll see them wear throwback jerseys from time to time. Of course, you have Jackie Robinson Day every year too. So I think Major League Baseball does a really good job connecting to them and making sure that those stats are there. Of course, stats in baseball are probably more important than any other sport. I mean, we always remembered who had the home run record. I think over the last couple of years that got diluted with the steroid era, but everyone could remember 755 or 61 home runs or 7 no hitters by Nolan Ryan. You remember a lot of these stats or 56 game hitting streak, the batting over 400. These are things that are legendary for baseball. So this was not, something that is done lightheartedly because stats are important and the stats this now changes some of those stats. And I think it's great. I mean, I think it's important that we see this and I make the connection to the Premier Lacrosse League because they did the same thing here a couple years back. So when the Premier Lacrosse League set up, it was effectively a revolt by the players away from the Major League Lacrosse, because they felt that it could be run better, it could be run differently, and their voices weren't heard. So Paul Rabel set up his own lacrosse league and took all the star players with him, and it became most of the star players with him. Um, but what they did then is the Major League Lacrosse wound up folding, and Premier Lacrosse League bought them out, effectively bought them out. And And then they took one of their teams, because when Premier Lacrosse League set up, they had all their different names and everything, obviously. But then they took one of the MLL names, one of the famous ones, the Boston Cannons, and made them an expansion team, and they became the Cannons Lacrosse Club. And then last year, when they further aligned with the cities, as I talked about on Monday, the Chrome, which was a team that I enjoyed and was following, became the Denver Outlaws, which was a major league lacrosse team. And so they're connecting there. And when they bought them out, they transferred the stats. And all this the so now the Premier Lacrosse League, if you had stats from the MLL, you're now in the PLL record books as well. And I think that was a really great merging. I'm not a huge fan of Paul Rabel as an owner, but I did feel like that was a good token to try to bring the lacrosse community together, because there's a big MLL versus PLL push. So, anyways, how that affects, I think this is great by Major League Baseball to bring these stats in. These leagues coexisted at the same time, and there's no reason that they shouldn't be together. And again, a lot of the Negro League players did wind up playing in Major League Baseball, and that's great. I think some of the detractors, which kind of irritates me, is like, well, what about the Japan League, and what about all these other things? Like, is completely different. It's a completely different environment. It's completely, like, we don't count, you know, Japanese stats. When like Ichiro came over, famously he had, if he would have been merged his Japan stats versus his MLB stats, he'd be up there like near the top of the leaderboard. I think he may even pass Pete Rose for the all-time hits leader. We don't do that. That's a different league. It's a different culture. It's a different environment. It's a different part of the world. That's not how it works, right? But this is a good merging of that. I really appreciate what Major League Baseball is doing here, and I think it then continues to connect the two histories together. And I think for the long term success, this is going to be great, because then people will get to know some of these leaders, and some of these great ball players that played in the Negro Leagues that may not have gotten to play in MLB or whatnot. So I do think it's a great effort. So I really applaud those activities. So that's topic number two. And look, I'm a minute. I still have a minute left. I don't really have much more to go on this. And this is why, when you're doing it solo, it's a little bit different. And then a little bit different to get into by yourself. So you have to carry a little bit more. So I'm trying my best, everyone, but I just don't have too much more to say on that. So I'm going to stop the timer there, and then I'm going to start a new timer. And you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to get into the politics part. And I think, obviously with the Trump verdict last week, you heard, of course, a lot of outrage, and this is unbelievable, and I can't believe we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that, and we all knew this was coming. And in fact, I also called it on the podcast that Florida would find a way to allow Donald Trump to vote, and of course, I mean, DeSantis must be listening to our podcast, because as soon as it came out, DeSantis was right in line to say, "Hey, make no mistake, Trump is going to be able to vote here." I also want to talk about like how everyone's like, this is just picking on Trump, and this is just a blue state doing this. Hey, everybody, here's a news flash. Like, if you didn't know Donald Trump in the '80s, when he was building his real estate empire, where he was constantly filing for bankruptcy time and time again. I think he's filed for bankruptcy 6 times. So I guess that goes to his motif that he's the smartest deal maker in the world. But while he was doing all this, guess where he was doing it? He was doing it in New York. And so guess where the crime occurred? It was doing it in New York. You usually go to trial where the crime occurred. You don't go to Oklahoma, or you don't go to Texas or Florida and call this case to trial. You do it where it happens. So let's dispel any of that outrage, and let's get into this about how this was all politically motivated. Look, Show me something that's not politically motivated at times, everyone. Like, I mean, how many times are we going to keep talking about impeachments? Our favorite person, Q bitch, she continues to talk about impeachment, like of Biden. I'm like, what are we fucking doing? And more cabinet members and all this other stuff. These are just and maybe she's worried. Maybe she's worried she's not going to get reelected, because she's going up against a challenger who has an army or a military career that they can get into, and maybe they can actually go against this. But this speaks to my point, is what I wanted to get into, is there's a couple ways we can really help our political environment. And I think it's really two simple things. One is we need term limits on all these federal elected officials. The president has term limits. Why don't Congress and why don't the Supreme Court have term limits? We're seeing a lot of this craziness with the Supreme Court justices as well. Look, why don't we it shouldn't be appointed for life. I mean, there should be term limits. Make it 30 years, make it 35 years for Supreme Court justices, and then for senators, make it 4 terms, 24 years for House of Representatives. Make it 25 years or 24 years or whatever you want to do there as well. Uh, but we're just getting, when you have these people in power for too long. I mean, we all know power corrupts. We all know that. I mean, please don't hold us as we're some shiny example of that. We have lobbyists for a reason that's corrupted. We all know this. So please don't pretend like it's not. Your votes have a price, or their votes have a price, and it comes in campaign donations, so they continue to run for reelection over and over again. I mean, you hear it with Nancy Pelosi, and when people push back about her doing insider trading, and she tries to dismiss that. Well, guess who sets the laws on that? She does, and this is why it's corrupt. Like, it benefits them. It benefits them all the time. So we need to put term limits in place. We need to allow these people, look, serve your time, but be gone. And we don't need you here for 50, 60 years like some of these people here. So that's the first part. The second part is we need to end gerrymandering. This is utterly preposterous when you look at some of these congressional districts. I'll continually cite this one in Illinois, or I'm sorry, in Louisiana, where it goes from the northwest corner of the state down to the southwest corner of the state. Like, how is that a representative of anybody other than this was designed or built because of gerrymandered districts? People like Kubich get to get elected because they're in their districts have been gerrymandered so that only the most extreme side of one or the other get to they basically have no competition. Now I'm hopeful that Kubich gets her due this time, because I think there is legitimate competition in that district. But at the same time, look, the deck is stacked in her favor. It's predominantly red, so even if people don't like her, if they just vote party lines, they're gonna they're gonna reelect her, and I think that's where we fail as a country. And then you get into, by not having gerrymandered districts, you can get real representative government. And I think that's what we're missing here. We don't have representative government. We have people who have positioned it for their favor and support. And this is where I think the Republicans made a lot of effort over the years to win at the state level, so they could gerrymander the districts the way they wanted to. Not to say that Democrats don't do it on the same way, but they invested in local officials where the Democrats didn't before. They invested in local judges and appointing the right places at the state level, so that when it got to the federal level, they were in a better position and a little bit stronger on those fronts. So there's a lot there, and I'd love to hear Andy's view on it, but I think I know where he'd come along. I mean, he'd be very supportive of both those arguments of where I'm at. But I think we just have to stop allowing the politicians who set the rules to continue to define the rules. We as the people need to be able to hold them accountable and vote them out of office when there's a right person there. And look, and not just feel obligated that we have to vote one way or the other, because that's really the only person there. Some of these districts, they don't even have real competition. I mean, they put somebody up knowing they're going to lose. And I think that's just where things get a little crazy and out of control. So that one I did go a little bit long on, but I'm still under my 7 minute window, so I'm going to stop there. I got 20 seconds left. I see the rest of this time. So there, three by sevens. I think I did pretty good job working through those topics. I got a couple more topics. I got a fun one on Friday. I'm going to get into stupid movies that I love. Just random movies that I'm not even talking like the Naked Gun movies. Those are stupid movies, but I definitely love those. But I'm talking like really weird movies that I'm going to pull in here because I just love a good stupid movie. So, with that, everybody, I'm excited. Hopefully, you enjoy the podcast. Again, shout out to our listeners out there who are doing some polls on the short shorts and our other friends around the world. But with that, I'll catch up with you next time.